Join us as we welcome crime thriller maestro in the making, Tim Ayliffe. Tim's fifth novel, The Wrong Man, has not only stormed Amazon's bestseller list, but is also nominated for the 2024 Danger Prize and in the mix for the People's Choice Awards. Some serial killers like to share their secrets, others take them to the grave. A subheading from one of Tim's latest books. What inspired you to write The Wrong Man?
With my books, I always try to chip off a big issue. I find the best crime fiction that I've always enjoyed reading is obviously an entertaining tale with great characters.
Yep.
But at the heart of it is more than that. I want to learn a little bit about something within the world as it is now. So with all of my books, I try to do that. And with The Wrong Man, I've looked at misogyny and on all levels, and then that extreme end of violent misogyny, because it's such a hot button issue at the moment, because it's a problem that is just not being solved. Yeah, so for me, the big issue I wanted to explore this time, it's my fifth book.
Yep.
I've got a different issue in every book.
Yep.
This one was misogyny. And you look at some of the stats, and this year, for instance, alone, a woman is dying at the hands of a male every 4 days. It used to be one a week, which was totally unacceptable as well. But it's actually getting worse. No one's got a plan for it. So for me, I think with my books, if I can peel back the curtain on the darkness, so to speak, on an issue, that's usually an issue that's a dark issue, then because it's a crime novel, then all the better. And giving readers, I guess with my journalistic background, trying to give readers a thorough understanding of some of the problems. And as a journalist, we were constantly, in my years, I was a journalist for 25 years, only sort of left that career at the end of last year. And it was something constantly we're reporting on all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, why are these statistics not getting better?
Yeah.
So then when I sat down to write, the fifth in this series that I write, I thought, let's have a look at this issue, because as a man, I can still write that book. I think you don't need to be a woman to understand misogyny and the impacts of misogyny, as long as you're a man who is really attuned to that, listening to that. Because I think the more that, I guess, men are in this space trying to improve things, then the better, because we've all got responsibility to do that. And look, I'm a fiction writer, so I'm tackling that issue in a different way, but I'm trying to give a really realistic, portrayal in a way of that issue. While hopefully giving readers a ripping story that's going to want them to keep turning the pages and want to enjoy reading, as good crime fiction can do.
The title grabbed me. Hitchcock loved the accusation of the innocent man as well. Is that the ABC News breakfast room, I'm sure it's a treasure trove for story ideas, but how did that actual concept come to you?
Well, I'm always interested in, I guess, complex plots, but also the idea that the wrong person's been blamed for a crime.
Yeah, so it's everyone's worst nightmare, isn't it?
It is, but then in this book, the idea of the wrong man means a lot more. So the wrong man in this book is a serial killer in prison for killing many people. Yeah. But there is a crime that he's been...
It's not the protagonist being the wrong man. Yeah.
That's right. But there's been, he's been jailed for many murders. One of them, it now looks like he didn't commit. So he's the wrong man in that sense. But then the actual idea of the wrong man, which was the broader title meaning, which was, when I'm looking at that issue of misogyny, it's this sort of behaviour that makes the wrong man. So whether it's... So in this book, we've got a police detective who's, been the victim of, sexting effectively, and her, someone distributing images of her. We've got a social media influencer who has been, is a victim of a horrific crime, but also the way those images, of that crime are shared. That, people are doing this, that in workplaces, women are still, copying bad jokes, getting paid less than men for the same roles, all those different things. So I guess the perpetrators of those things are the wrong man. And that's in a way where the title comes from as well, which is that deeper broader meaning.
Yep. How important is the right idea?
It's really important.
Yeah.
I think.
Is that the hardest, longest? Yeah.
It is. I mean, with me, ideas, start from a conversation. So with my first book, often starts from a conversation or something that I've read. So with my first book, The Greater Good, I was in the US for work. I was in the State Department, and I'm having a conversation with this State Department official, and he asked me a question, said, could I ever imagine a day when Australia would turn its back on the US in favour of a closer relationship with China? And that question, regardless of the answer, and then what we talked about, gave me the idea for the first book, which is Australia caught in the middle of the US-China power struggle. So back to your question about how important is the idea, so I guess sellable concept, it is really important because you need to be able to explain, okay, what is the hook for this book? Why should I read it?
Yeah, and big enough for a novel.
Yeah.
That's a good one, though, the Chinese-US relationship, because we think it's just forever, old Sam, Uncle Sam sort of thing, but it may not, what if it's not? So, interesting for your first.
Well, it goes deeper, but also, I mean, with my books are, they're in a way international crime thrillers. They all can be read as standalones, but as I said, they try to chip off a big issue. But why I wanted to write those books and make Sydney a character in those books is because Sydney and Australia is actually a far more important strategic country than we've ever been before. So we are a really important ally to the United States in this part of the world because we're living in the China century. So I thought, okay, let's not jump in the rural noir space. There's enough people doing that.
Yeah.
I want to actually write books that haven't been written as much. Sure, there's some books out there that, writers that have done a little bit of this, but I wanted to carve out a bit of an area for myself to say, okay, I want to, Australia's a global country, Sydney's a global city. I'm going to come up with a bunch of characters that'll recur in my books that'll help tell those big international stories and allow me to dive into those issues. But at the same time, do something that's hopefully thoroughly entertaining for readers.
I love how your protagonist crisscrosses Sydney and mentions all these places that I know. It makes it very real, and I was like, have I known that to be the case before, or is it normally a fictitious kind of place? But I like how you did that.
Well, Sydney's a character in my books, no doubt. I love writing Sydney because I love Sydney. There's things I hate about Sydney. There's no place I'd rather be.
Yeah.
It is a great character because of its warts and all things, right? So it's going through some of those. Beautiful harbour, beautiful beaches. We've got a multicultural melting pot in particularly the west and southwestern suburbs where a lot of the new migrants are coming. So we've got this almost segregated aspect to our city as well, where a lot of the wealthier areas, so a lot of those coastal and North Shore areas, are traditionally more like white, Anglo areas, whereas the multiculturalism is, I guess, in the west and southwest. And that actually is not great. For a multicultural city, we want to, you want to see multiculturalism in all sorts of areas. Multiculturalism, as we know, is something that helps to grow the economy. So there's issues that, that sort of, I guess othering of new migrants, it's been happening forever, right? From Second World War into post-Vietnam, into the Tiananmen Square massacre when a lot of the Chinese started coming to Australia. We've seen issues around racism, and we still have them now. And this time it's around a lot of, Middle Eastern communities that are feeling the brunt of that because they've been a lot of our new migrants after the Gulf Wars and the war in Afghanistan as well. So, look, for me, they're some of the issues I look at as well. And as I said, look, there's other little bits that I probably poke fun at too, which is you can spend your life in tunnels paying road tolls in this city as well and miss all the beauty.
It's a bit of Swiss cheese that turns Sydney to Swiss cheese. Your fiction, you've already mentioned, is based in reality. You could almost have your own genre Tim? Non-fiction, fiction, hey?
Well, look, everything in my books I always say either has happened, will happen, or could happen. It's a general rule that I write by.
Yeah.
So the first book, obviously, is Australia caught in the middle of the US-China power struggle, which I mentioned before. My second book's around Islamist-inspired terrorism. Third book is around white supremacists and abuse of power and neo-Nazis and the rise of the far right, which we've seen. The fourth book is around the spy game. So what the Russians and the Chinese have been up to in Australia. A lot of that's based on truth. And then the fifth book that we've already talked about, The Wrong Man, is about misogyny.
So, Tim, what do you hope readers take away from The Wrong Man?
Well, I hope they're thoroughly entertained. I
Is that first and foremost?
Oh, yeah, because I think, look, it's almost, that's first and foremost. I'm writing what I want to be really entertaining books.
Yep.
But entertaining books can be entertaining on different levels. And a really important level for me is this element of, okay, I've got a good understanding around that issue in reading this book. And I don't write in a preachy way or anything. I'm just trying to, put all the cards out there and let people see the cards and make up their own minds on things. But for me to be able to, as I said earlier, peel back the curtain on an issue, write it in a way, I want them to be thoroughly entertained.
Yes.
As a starting point, because I think...
Priority number one.
Priority number one. In great films, TV, books, you want people to have a great experience because that's what they're going to it for, because they like reading or they like watching films. So for me, I want them to have a great experience with the book. I want them to have twists and turns in there that they don't see coming. I want them to be surprised. I want them to laugh and cry with my characters. But I also want them to come away from it going, that's really made me think about that issue that he's brought up.
Yep.
And I don't write these books in a preachy way or anything, or in a heavy way. It's more of a show, don't tell, which is, I think, the power of good storytelling. So in regards to this one, as I've talked about, it's misogyny, violent misogyny, and the extreme end of that being incels, which is those involuntary celibate men who are a real online cult, clique, if you like, where these like-minded men are getting in touch with each other. They are the extreme end of misogyny. They believe they're born unattractive to women. They're very angry about that. And actually in real life, and as I said, I borrow from real life for a lot of my books, that these men have been behind some pretty awful acts of violence. In Texas, a man killed an incel, a self-identifying incel. Guys identifying as an incel killed 11 people with a high-powered weapon. In Toronto, another man who identified as an incel mowed down and killed 9 people with his car. So there's been other attacks around the world in other parts of Europe and the UK. So that's something that I really, dived into with this book. But I guess a lot of people may not know about incels. So they're going to get a bit of an understanding around them. And it's a very realistic portrayal for me, the way I approach this in my books. In the same way, and I've been inspired by writers like John le Carre, like Michael Connolly, the American writer, who writes LA like no one else. And his character, Harry Bosch, I'm in many ways trying to do for Sydney what Michael Connolly's done for Los Angeles. So my character's John Bailey, his is Harry Bosch.
On that, Bailey and Ayliffe, apart from the B, do you sort of see yourself as one of your characters a bit, or does it help that way? Or
I do get asked this question a bit, and Bailey is not me.
Right.
He's an amalgam of a lot of people that I've worked with. I was never a war correspondent, for instance, and he's a former war correspondent.
Right.
I worked with a lot of war correspondents in my time working for Sky News UK in Britain, and also at the ABC. So I was executive producer of News Breakfast. And then I went on for the last sort of 7 or so years. I've been running TV news for the ABC, so News Channel, ABC News Channel, and a few other areas. And I've worked with some amazing people and a lot of foreign correspondents who are literally obsessed with the story. And so correspondents, whether from the ABC or in the UK or others that I've not worked with, but I know, I see the way they give over so much of their life to chase, I guess, the truth, but to be on the scene in that high adrenaline kind of, war zone, conflict zone, storytelling. And I've seen the impact on some of those people, and some of them are self-medicating with booze. Some of them are riddled with PTSD. So Bailey's not based on any one individual. He's drawn from a lot of people. Cops go through a similar thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they get so obsessed with actually doing what they feel is right, catching bad guys, stopping bad people from doing bad things, which is so important. They often sacrifice a lot of their own personal lives to be able to do that well.
Stress-related levels, is it, basically? Or
Yeah, I mean, they take on so much pressure on themselves to be able to stop the bad people from doing bad things. Or if you're a journalist in a war zone, you don't stop, It's the rule of inertia. You keep going, And then when you do stop, everything can crash in.
Right.
So that's, in a way, what happened with my character, John Bailey, particularly as we set up the first book. And with him, with these books, it's about him, I guess, reconnecting with real life, his family that he left behind to be that war correspondent, reconnecting with his daughter, all of that. So he grows throughout the books. So his character is very much made up of many people. And then there's me in there too. I mean, particularly around, some of, maybe it's his sense of humour at times, or maybe it's his views on Sydney or the world, or, there's definitely me in there. I'd never deny that. And people that actually know me would, say, don't hide.
So with your other characters, or with your characters, do you go inside out, like from the inside out?
Sometimes they grow for me on the page. So I know what you mean by that, but I think sometimes I'm getting to know them as I'm writing them. I usually have a good understanding. If I feel someone's going to be an important character in the book, then I know some of those layers already, and then some of those layers will grow as I'm writing. And that goes for the plot too sometimes, to be honest, because I go into a book knowing a general arc, how maybe where it starts, a couple of beats in the middle and the end. I am starting to plan a bit more with the books, but there is that discoverability for me that I think if I don't know the answer to something, or if I don't know who this person is yet, then
how can the audience?
How can the reader?
Yeah.
How can the reader? And let's discover them together, and let's surprise each other together.
So plotting, is that the same as an outline?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, look, there's different ways of plotting. Everyone has different ways of doing it. But an outline, there are some writers. So, for instance, Matthew Riley, I once heard him say he doesn't write page 1 until he knows what happens on page 401.
Right.
Now, that's an extreme end of outlining, right? But there's a lot of
Is
writers
that beginning with the end in mind sort of thing, is it?
That is actually doing an outline, which could even be, I don't know exactly his process, but for instance, David Baldacci, who's a big international writer, I know he does an outline that could be 10, 20,000 words that then he just fattens out into then being the book.
Yeah.
And other writers do that. But then again, then there's some writers that literally sit down, have a general idea, start, and then just go and work it out as they go.
Right.
I mean, I remember a writer saying once to me, Michael Robotham is a great Australian writer, and he's been very generous and a good mentor to me. He said to me once that he was halfway through a book and he hadn't decided which of 5 people was going to be the killer. That he's already writing in the book. And my head almost exploded and I went, how'd you do that? But, I mean, he writes like that. That's how he goes.
Tim, what drives narrative? Conflict, action, or plot? And tell me if I'm right with, is conflict action or... Yeah.
Well, conflict and action are probably similar.
Yeah.
In a way. But for me, I probably just go to the way I'd think about it, which is, character, place, plot.
Oh, gotcha.
And for me, as I'm sitting down to write a chapter, if I can't explain to myself what that chapter's doing in the book, as in how is that chapter advancing the plot, and if I can't explain that to myself, then I'll just delete it. And by advancing the plot, that could be really getting to know a character. That's advancing the plot. Or it could be, I guess the setting would need to be part of something. I mean, the setting's never going to be purely plot. It's something. But it's really around character and plot. And then the other one for me is probably pace. So I like to put a lot out there and then have it, I guess, slowly come back together and then steamroll home is the way I kind of think about it if I visualise how I want to write a book.
How do you change pace?
Well, Raymond Chandler used to say if he ever got stuck with a plot point, he'd just have someone come into the room with a gun. So, look, I think surprise, is a good way.
Because I heard somewhere that shorter words, shorter sentences does it too. Does that work for you? Because your book does seem to start tying loose ends up, and it seems to pick up cadence, if you like.
It does, and thanks for saying that, because that's what I tried to do with it. It's really I'm exploring and setting things out to then pick up the cadence and go, as I sort of said earlier. But look, I do tend to write in a quite a disciplined way with short sentences, descriptions, very visual but punchy. I don't labour. I don't have like a paragraph that takes up half a page. I really want to actually keep the viewer. It's almost like a rhythm sometimes, to be honest. There's a rhythm to good writing, I think. And so my rhythm is actually, is a discipline in I guess, page turning and discipline.
On that, Tim, so they talk about flow state, deep work. Do you get into that?
Not really.
No.
No. I mean, look, I talk to a lot of writers, listen to a lot of interviews with writers. I've not really read too many books. Actually, I don't think I've ever finished one on how to write a book.
Yeah, right.
I've sampled a few, found a few chapters in some that have been a bit helpful. But I think I write for the reader, which is another rule that I write by, which is actually it's got to really work. It's got to be entertaining. I'm not writing for myself, but I am writing books that I know I can write that I'm also interested in reading. So I'm trying to, I guess, write for the reader in a way that I know, well, I hope they're going to be entertained and achieve those other things that I talked about.
Yep. I really like back off Bailey, spewing a piece of pie. I'm busy Bailey. I like your alliteration. Are they? Is that a pattern interrupt? Like, other than just rolling off the tongue, is it? What else does that serve? Besides being good to read and stuff, you know what I mean?
Look, I think being good to read, is it. I think sometimes if alliteration's a tool. Sometimes,
Does that come in after, or does that flow from you straight up?
It might come through the rewrite, or it might come straight up.
Yep.
I really there is a rhythm to the sentence, the paragraph, and the page for me. I want things to feel like they're all interconnected, and I think using tools like alliteration can do that.
What's your definition of a sentence?
I don't know. It's a hard one to answer. Definition of a sentence:
a complete thought, verb, action, subject, verb.
It just can mean so many different things. I think it's just got a justifiable place. It's going to advance what you're doing.
Advance, which is new information, right?
Yeah, I think advancing is probably the best way to describe it. Yeah.
A glaring James Randall slapping the windscreen, jamming his index finger. I like your verbs too. Yeah. How important? Yeah, you've got to get the mix right. Is that right?
Yeah, but good writing's good writing. And I'm hoping I'm improving with every book on that front. I do sometimes write and go, I think I've written a similar sentence to that before, so delete and think of a new way of saying something. So it's always, and then it's responding to the place or the characters or how someone might talk, or there's different things that I think about when I'm writing. But I'm trying to be original. So if it feels like I've either read it or written it before, just quickly get rid of it.
That's a good one. Tim, how do you develop your characters, particularly the protagonist in The Wrong Man?
Everyone needs to grow throughout the book.
The arc.
I need to peel back a layer of their character. So I think of them like a layers of an onion in a way. There's
a lot going on.
There's things I'm peeling back because you want to. If you're so John Bailey is my key protagonist, and Detective Holly Sutton is my other key protagonist of this book, and in some ways Annie Brooks, which is a female journalist with an interesting backstory as well. It's giving readers a real understanding of them, what they've been through, what drives them, that makes them interesting. Otherwise, you're stuck with cardboard characters, and I never want to write them. So and that goes for some of my villains as well, but I guess with the villains, I don't take readers inside villains' heads.
Right,
I do.
right.
I do with my, I guess, heroes, if you like. So,
Okay.
So for me,
It's interesting.
yeah. So what drives bad people to do bad things, we're seeing through the eyes of the people that are hunting them down.
Do other writers do that?
Some do. I mean, look, what's his name? Susskind, who wrote Pigeon and Perfume and stuff. I mean, you spend your life inside the bad characters' minds. But look, for me, I haven't done it yet. Not really interested in it. But although, so I've got a character called Ronnie Johnson, who's a recurring character in all my books. So he's a CIA officer with big and small roles in all my books, and he's important because if I'm writing global thrillers set in Sydney, I need to represent the global community in some way, and someone who's representing America's interests is great for that. So he's the kind of guy that will do anything for what he believes is right. And by that, he means America's view on what is right. So that's where the title of the first book came from, The Greater Good, because it's that idea of the greater good, and that can have multiple meanings, but the greater good on behalf of America is American, I guess, supremacy, in that they are the lone superpower because they're the only ones that can be trusted to keep peace in the world. And they've got a pretty good argument for that, by the way, if you think of the past century. And what we went through, the First World War and Second World War, and this idea of never let this happen again. So, Ronnie Johnson is that character for me. He gets his hands dirty doing bad things to do the right thing in his views. There are lines that he crosses. He talks about this with Bailey. They're good old friends. In fact, the backstory with them, which gets told throughout the books and gets touched on in every book, is that Bailey spent 10 months in captivity after being kidnapped in Iraq, which is a story that is actually based on truth. There's been many, many journalists kidnapped, many Western journalists kidnapped as well and held, and for very long periods of time. And Ronnie Johnson was involved in the freeing of John Bailey, and they go back decades, and they have these conversations. And that helps me explore that as an issue, as in America's idea of the greater good, with someone like Bailey. Bailey's black and white, right? There's good, there's bad. You can't do bad things to fight for good, in his view. He's a journalist. His weapon's a pen, not a gun. Ronnie Johnson is a CIA officer, and he will do anything for that end outcome, which is what he believes is right. So he lives in the grey world, whereas Bailey's black and white.
Toddy Evans is a high-profile influencer, as you say, case in the novel. A little bit outside from your journalistic experience, why do high-profile cases get more resources? Is it because it's just they're getting more attention? And
absolutely, they're getting more attention, and there are good and mostly bad reasons for this, because you have a beautiful PR executive, effectively, who's an influencer with all these followers. Something bad happens to that person, they're going to get a lot more attention than a 25-year-old Indigenous woman living in regional Australia who is murdered. Because the media's fascination, particularly the commercial media, is going to be focused on the one they know is going to, I guess, sell newspapers or be more, I guess, titillating is probably the word for the consumer. So people that want to know why and what happened to this woman. We've seen her, she's a sort of pseudo-celebrity, if you like. But why is her life worth more than a 25-year-old Indigenous woman murdered in regional Australia? No one can explain that one.
I really like how your prologue just cuts to the chase. It gets straight into the action. I suppose because it's a series, you don't have to worry about backstory too much, or are they standalone?
No, backstory is vitally important, to be honest. Each novel.
Yeah.
Because each novel I write as a standalone. So it's part of a
Right.
series because they are recurring characters. But anyone can pick up a book in any order and read it and not even worry about the other books. And if they like them, go back and pick up another one. So there's an interconnectedness there with them. But as an author, you have to do that. There aren't many, probably the Harry Potter books aside and a few others where you have to read them in order and they're all interconnected in a way that the story is flowing all the way through. I think with a good crime series and that would be, I'd use Michael Connolly earlier as an example for that. Michael Rowbotham's Joe O'Loughlin series. You can pick up any of those books in any order and read them. So for me, that's what I have to do. Yep. And then talking about the prologue, interestingly, right, with books, a bit of advice came to me from my publisher years ago, which was that writers, novelists now, we are competing with television.
Yeah, right.
Because there is so much great stuff on television, on streaming services, that people can sit there and binge, 8 hours a night, rather than 1 hour of the week. So gone are the days where we're all sitting there waiting for the latest episode of The West Wing to drop.
Yep.
Now
it's all there.
It's all mostly there. Although, look, some things are starting to be dropped again weekly. You can see Apple and others doing that as a bit of a device and a test. But still, you can still wait to watch that series until it's all there. So as an author, so when I'm writing a novel, I need to grab the reader in those first few pages. They need to go, whoa, I want to read this. I want to keep reading.
In the midst of things, as they say. So what is happening with book sales?
Book sales are going pretty well. I mean, it's look
not yours personally, but just in general.
In general.
Or yours personally. Whatever.
No. So in
relation to your point you just made about the Netflix stream.
Got you. Yeah. Well, bookstores are struggling. Booktopia's gone under this year.
Right.
Wow. And
weren't they online big time as well?
Yeah, they are. They're an online retailer, but they were one of the biggest online Aussie retailer as well.
Wow.
And
what's that? Yeah,
well, look, bookshops are struggling too. Because there's a lot of discount books out there through some of those really big retailers where people can get cheaper books, and it's tough. It's tough, but also something that I've found since starting this sort of writing journey is people pause before spending $30 on a book in a way they don't pause before spending $30 on a few beers at the pub.
Yeah.
There's this thing with creativity whereby
maybe you need a Netflix for books where you can pay a subscription.
Yeah. Well, there are those. I mean, Audibles like that for listening and others. But no, I think that this is it's a creative question. People pause before thinking about spending money on
what does The Wrong Man retail for? 26 or something?
About 33.
Yeah.
And then, but you can find it for 25, which is still pretty reasonable, I think. But I know the book market is just struggling a bit in general.
Why do you think they pause? Is it just at the moment inflation rates?
I don't know what it is. I think that I've had people say to me in the past that they've grabbed my books. Read my books off a website where they get them for free.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's stealing, right? So it's okay to steal my books, but if I walk into your workplace and, pick up, you're selling T-shirts, I'm just going to walk out with a T-shirt, is that all right? People just don't see it that way. Yeah, they just think that that somehow these...
You're getting enough money somewhere else or something. Yeah.
Somehow these books or TV for people that illegally download or people that, the movies as well... Somehow they just get made and everyone involved gets so much money. The opposite couldn't be true. The average Australian author is earning $18,000 a year.
Right.
$18,000 a year. And some of those authors are best-selling authors. So it's a really tough game to be in. And
you strike it rich, I know I'm getting off the topic here, but, How to Win Friends and Influence People or something, written 40 years ago. I suppose that's non-fiction, but... You do strike an oil well like that, you'll get paid forever.
Yes.
Is that true too?
Yeah, you will. You will. Yeah. But I mean, but you're talking about 0.0001% of the market there. So you've got writers that that if they do strike it lucky and it really goes bang everywhere around the world, then they're well into the millions and great for them. But the majority of writers are struggling to pay the bills. They've usually all got other jobs.
What challenges did you face while writing The Wrong Man?
Well, as a bloke writing about misogyny, there's my first issue that I'm a man, so I had to make sure I was treating the issue sensitively and really doing my research and getting my editors are both women, which is great, and they're good in many ways, sensitivity checking things, but also just doing that research going in. It's whether it's talking to people, whether it's
what do you do for that? What specifically?
Well, there's people that answer my calls, which is great. Which is whether they're former law enforcement or
so people are quite helpful with that sort of thing.
Yeah. You find where they actually want a true portrayal of their, whether it's police or FBI or Australian Federal Police, or they want what they do for a living characterised and portrayed correctly, without giving away state secrets in a way. So for me, I'm lucky. I've got people that answer my calls on that. And look, I guess it's in my journalistic background as well. I know how to go find that information if I need it. If there's someone I don't know, like a contact of mine, for instance, that may then, if I don't have the contact I need, a contact of mine may go, give this guy a call. And this is what he really does for a living, but you can't ask him that. But know that when he answers some of your questions, he's got the runs on the board to make sure that you're going to get the correct answer and what you're looking for. So that could be, for instance, if you're looking in the intelligence world. So for me, I knew who to speak to make sure that I was on the right track. Yeah,
I imagine it's pretty important research. While we're talking about research,
do you look? It's different. It's on different levels with all my books. Yeah. So in many ways, my day job was like research. For me. As a journalist and being involved in a lot of the investigations the ABC was doing, sometimes there is basically as an editorial leader. I was a managing editor. So everyone else is doing the hard work, but I get to see what they're doing. And then other times for me, it is actually doing that deep research myself. So sometimes I might. With a book, if I'm diving into an area where I really need to do some research, I might do a lot of that even before I get going, and then do a bit of an outline to make sure that I feel like I'm writing it correctly, because I might know what the story is and I can just rip in and write that story, but it's all the intricacies around that story that makes it more real and believable. So, for instance, in the book that I wrote, Killer Trader Spy, about Russian spies operating in Australia, and some of the sort of tactics they've used in Australia and around the world, I probably had many conversations and read 10 books or something, and speeches from. So the ASIO Director General, Mike Burgess, gives the annual threat assessment speech every year, and I quote from him directly in the book, where he says that there are more foreign spies or their proxies operating in Australia since the height of the Cold War. So when he says something like that, and I'm doing all this research around it, wanting to write a spy thriller about spies operating in Australia, and he comes out and says that, I go, okay, maybe I'm on the right track here. Yeah,
a bit of a beacon for your direction. Kevin Spacey says that story is everything. For someone who's been surrounded in story, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, story is everything. There's no doubt about it. Well, story. Look, the only thing I'd add to that really is, story and character. And character is everything as well.
Yeah.
I mean, because you need
characters create stories.
Characters, they do, but then they're part of stories.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
so
right.
it could be. I mean, he may be talking about also the story of the character, and in which case, story is everything. Encapsulates all of the things that I'm talking about, and he may be referencing too.
Yeah.
So no, I agree with him on that. Great storytelling, powerful stories, great characters, great setting. They're the magic ingredients for, I think.
Why do we love conflict in entertainment and avoid it in our real lives? Do you think?
Well,
Is it because we... Oh, yeah, you answer.
No, I think we're voyeurists in many ways, aren't we?
Voyeurists,
I think that if there's something really bad happening over here in this book, then I feel really great that it's not happening in my life.
Okay.
I think for us it's an escapism. It's like people who like watching horror films.
See what it's like without the danger. Yeah.
That's right. It's like dipping your toe in that water and getting an understanding of it and going, oh, I'm really glad that's not happening in my neck of the woods. But then I'd say, like, truth is stranger than fiction, really. I mean, there's been cases, stories around the world, the most horrific things, like a father locking his daughter in a basement in Austria for however many years and fathering children with her. I mean, you couldn't make that up. It's horrific.
Yeah.
But then if a novelist made that up, you go, oh, come on.
But
then it's happened. There's in incels, for instance, that I write about in The Wrong Man. Involuntary celibate men believe they are born unattractive to women. They're angry about it. And the extreme end of that is having a awakening, is what they call it, to go and kill as many people as possible.
An awakening.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up, but that's true. I think there's so much truth in fiction as well. But I think good stories, and going back to your question around, I guess, exploring the darkness a bit in entertainment, does make us lie down and sleep well at night thinking that was just a book. That was just a story.
Okay. Tim, how do you balance action and suspense in your novels?
I think through unpredictability.
Yep.
So I think you want to surprise the reader as much as possible. I don't really like reading action books, to be honest.
Yep.
I find them a bit dull and predictable because they're just boom, onto the next thing, onto the next thing, onto the next thing, where I want to have action in my books that has a real point to it. And you might be on the road with a bit of action and then suddenly it's going to go, like this way, and surprise the reader.
Is that because we care about the character?
It is.
Yeah. How do you get us to care about the character?
It's understanding them, flaws and all. I think they need to be real.
Yeah.
I think they need to make mistakes. I think they need to... I think they need to show emotion and a lot of our human frailties. So that could be an addiction to gambling that they're battling. It could be alcoholism they're battling. These are all things that are real in life that people like lean on.
Even if they're not a drinker, for example, they'll bond with him if he's an alcoholic.
It makes the character interesting, but it makes them human. So if someone's battling something that they've got their own internal struggle,
right,
then you and I have our own internal struggles on other things, so we can identify with that person by saying they're not perfect, neither are we, but they're still doing something good, or they're still managing to get on with life. They're still getting up each day, doing their thing, but they're not perfect, and neither are we.
Being specific, so you're describing Long Bay Jail there, and you give really good specific detail. How do you know? Because that and your green Toyota Corolla from '94 with 250,000 clicks on it, was that your personal thing? How do you know when you've done enough to be able to paint a vivid picture like you did, and not overdo it? Is there overdoing it?
Yeah, I try to put enough detail in there so that people genuinely feel like they're there, or that they understand something, without overloading it with so much detail that then slows down the plot. And it's like, enough already on the prison descriptions. So,
but it was important to, when you change location, I guess it's more important to create that. Is that fair to say?
Oh, it is. And location setting is always a character in the books, as I say. And so for me, if I'm moving around Sydney, and look, my books go from Sydney to Canberra to, I've been in London and Middle East as well. But Sydney's the big character in the book. I love writing Sydney. So if I'm moving around Sydney, then there's ways to give people a feel of where we are, whether it's through the food that is being consumed there, whether it could be takeaway food or
Harry's Cafe.
Harry's Cafe to Wheels down at Woolloomooloo. Or it could be, getting a kebab at late night at, in Newtown.
Engadine.
Engadine. Yeah, exactly. So I think having enough of those places in an honest way.
Yeah.
I think the readers.
Do you have
respond to
fictitious
that.
ones as well, or you just...
Not
yeah.
often, yeah. Look, I've got a racist attack in a Sydney pub that I fictionalised the name of the pub.
Yeah.
But in a way, I sort of regret that a little bit because it probably wouldn't have mattered. Everything usually in my books is a real place.
Yeah. Interesting. For The Wrong Man, for research, was there anything specific you had to do there that was quite, unusual?
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a bit of like deep research, get an understanding of it, just get going with the book. So no, not really.
Not really. Stephen King has said that to write is heaven, to edit is divine. Have you found that to be true? Would you agree with that? Yeah, how does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about my answer. Who's to argue with the great Stephen King?
Yes.
No, look, I agree with that. I do.
Like, do you have a bit of a like? I think he cuts 20-30% or something after a break. Do you do that?
I don't. I tend to edit as I go. So I'll write a chapter and then sweep through, and then go to the next one.
Yeah, okay.
So and that's how I kind of identify, and allows me to think about where I'm going next as well.
Yeah.
If I haven't worked out that part of the plot. Because sometimes the best writing is when you stop and think and you don't write, because you're really working on the plot. And because if you write too fast and you get ahead of yourself, sometimes you might write yourself into a corner and go, and then you're going, delete, and I've deleted.
Did you come to any corners on?
Oh, mate, my third book, The Enemy Within, I wrote twice. I deleted it, the first one, and just went, I've got to do this again.
Wow. And so what did you learn from there? You're going too fast?
I learnt that, I was writing myself through the plot at the same time, and I was plotting and writing at the same time. Whereas with complicated plots, sometimes, like for me, I need to really think it through to if I'm planting a seed now that's going to have, headlights on it in 30,000 words, then you've got to do a bit of planning around that. You can always go back and insert things and change, and I always do that sort of thing. But I think, going back to Stephen's point, I think that I absolutely love the writing process, and I do enjoy the editing because I enjoy getting those sentences perfect. I enjoy the moments where an intricate part of the plot, you've really nailed it, and for me, clarity is everything. So the reader just has an aha moment because I've been clever with the way I've laid down the breadcrumbs in a way.
Yeah.
So that stuff, I think you get through the story part, but particularly through the edit when you're really fine tuning. So, but the only thing I disagree with Stephen King on there is that, sometimes it's incredibly painful.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Writing is tough.
Yep.
It's tough. You got a discipline to just get up and get going every day. It's still
on that. A lot of people would like to write a book. But you have, you do, and you've done a number of them. What is it? What is it with you?
Look, I love it. I've
Yes.
always wanted to be a storyteller.
Yeah.
Like, as write books. I knew that from when I was a kid.
Yeah, right.
And so, my father is a writer. He's always written books on the side from his job in advertising, which retired many, many years ago, but he still writes. And Bryce Courtney was one of his closest friends, a good friend of the family, and he'd given me some advice over the years about writing. I was lucky enough to spend a bit of time with him before he died, and one of the key things he had said is, his secret to writing is bum glue, which is just sit there, and you got to be there. You got to do the hard yards to write, because you can have your good days and bad days. But I knew that I wanted to write books from when I was a kid because I loved reading them.
Yeah, right.
And I thought, I really want to do this. And then
What was a standout book for you in the early formative years?
Stephen King's It.
Yeah, right.
Pet Sematary. Just the imagination that he had to come up with those books, and the way they came alive in my head. Misery was another one of his. But then I loved reading Bryce Courtney's Power of One. I loved Wilbur Smith's books. I loved C.S. Lewis books, Roald Dahl as a kid. I was a big reader, and I think anyone who has any interest in writing, it starts with reading,
Yeah. So you got to read a lot.
Yeah.
He was fun. I was only talking about Roald Dahl the other day. It was how it came up. phenomenal imagination, wasn't he? Like there was something on TikTok about the old grandpa sleeping in bed for 20 years, and then he gets a ticket to the candy shop, and he's out quick as a flash. And it was like, who comes up with that? Family being in bed for 20 years, like you never forget that detail.
Incredible where his stuff came from. He just had the most incredible imagination, and for an older man as well to be writing these books that children just loved. That's an incredible skill.
Yeah. What do you think, Tim? Simple stories, complex characters, or complex stories? What do you prefer? Because your plots there's a lot to them.
Yeah, there is, but there's got to be a simplicity there as well. Mm-hmm. So I think if there's too much going on, then you've got a problem. If there is,
what problem do you have? Do we lose track of what
you lose the reader?
Yeah,
I think if you're going to have some complicated plot moves, you're going to need to find a way to neatly stitch that stuff together, which is what I really painstakingly do, because I don't want the reader sitting there going, oh, who was that guy again? Or, oh, what, I don't know how we got here. I hate reading books like that. And they still get published. And they're tough. You got to spend a lot of time with them to really understand them. And I don't want to write those books. I want to write books that people can pick up, read a couple of chapters, go, love that, go to bed. Next night, another 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Go to bed. So it's that's important to me. So if you're looking at complexity, make sure you stitch it together in a simple way.
Do you have a daily word sort of count you like to do? Or?
I don't have a word count. When I was working as a journalist, I was with these books. See, my first book deal was I signed in 20. My first book came out in 2018, so I signed it in 2017, and that was a 3-book deal.
So you signed? What did you just straight away sign with someone, or how did that come about?
So I'd written a draft of a book, and I felt like, okay, this is a character I'd like to keep writing. So I, sent off to some publishers, and actually I got a lot of interest from publishers first up, which I was very fortunate about.
Wow.
And
because that's hard to do, right?
Yeah, it is. But look, through that whole, exercise experience, there were publishers that came and went, and then I got a really great agent who helped me get that the book to its best form, and then when we took it to Simon & Schuster, then they hadn't read it yet, so they read it in its best form. And I'd written 2 synopsises for the next 2 books, and they went, we love this book, we love the ideas for the next ones, we want to build a series here, so here's a 3-book deal.
Wow.
And I was lucky, but I wrote that book over 3.5 years. And then they were saying, ideally, we'd love a book a year. So,
oh wow!
So the first one we're gonna publish is next year. So we did that deal in July, and then they said the first one will come out in May 2018. So I was my wife went, this is amazing, and then how the hell are you going to do that? So that's when I removed it from our life as much as possible, which was I used to do late nights, mornings, things whenever I could just find a few hours here and there.
Yeah,
and not in any consistency. And then just because it was fitting around a busy day job, and we had 2 young kids at the time. Our kids are still they're teenagers now, but or almost both teenagers. And so I had to figure out how am I going to now do this as well as my day job. So I used to get up at 5 o'clock Saturday, Sunday morning, and I'd write for anywhere between 3 and 5 hours both mornings, and that's all I would do every week. So it removed it from my day job entirely. So it was no distraction during the week. And I was able to, be hands-on at home during the week, and then also, well, as much as I could. As I said, really busy day job and very supportive wife, I should say. But
yes.
on the weekends, everyone's asleep at that time of the morning, and I thought, I'm an early riser. If I can get into a rhythm of writing then I can actually do this. So that's what I've been doing ever since. Yeah. And now...
So you're still with...
No, I left the ABC at the end of last year.
Right.
So now I'm writing full time.
Gotcha.
And
there was a black area. Is like, Yeah, sorry, go again.
Yeah, and look, there's a TV series in the works on my book as well. So I've got like quite a few things, going on with the books, which is exciting and is helping to me, do this in a way that's a bit more, I guess, financially stable for us. But I now write, I want to say 6 days, but I still probably do 7 days a week, getting up at about 5 or 6 and just write. And so I was up this morning early and, did 5, 6, what did I do? 5 hours today. And I find 5 to 6 hours is about what I max out at with my brain. But I'm in a bit of a rhythm, and that's how I tend to do it. So coming back to your original question around, do I have a daily
How many
goal?
Yeah, what would you do in 5 hours? Just on average,
anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000. Words, and 3,000 would be really big day, and those days tend to happen as I'm getting towards the end of a book because it's really just coming, and I'm actually in that zone at the moment.
Right.
So, look, I don't like to set a word limit because, as I talked about earlier, plot is so important, and if I haven't worked out where I'm going with the book, then if I'm writing words to satisfy a target each day, then I know that I'm going to end up deleting a lot of those words. And I'm also in danger of writing myself into a corner because I haven't worked out exactly where I'm going.
Yep.
So although I still have a general arc and I do little summaries as to help with an outline, that can change. And sometimes it really needs to change because they've got a better idea.
Yeah. Okay. So it's if better ideas supersede what you've got, you'll change.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So Tim, 5 books now.
Yep. 5,
Yeah. When do you think you really found your voice?
Probably
It sounds like you got it early-ish when things got serious.
Look. Every time I sit down to write a book, it's hard.
Yep.
And it should be because
every time a new book or each day?
Each book, each day, like it's always difficult. I think it's a thoroughly enjoyable thing to do, but it's difficult at the same time, which makes it rewarding. And I think anything good in life
is hard. Yeah.
Is like that. Which makes the end product or the payday at the end even better because you've worked hard for it. So yeah, I mean,
which one of your books just sort of came easy, if any?
The only book I would say that came easier was my third book, The Enemy Within, the second time I wrote it.
Right.
Because the first time I wrote it, it just didn't really work.
Okay.
And I remember my publisher saying to me, look, it's a good book, but we need great. And, so she said, you've got 2 options here. We can fix this and I'll help you with brainstorm stuff and you can fix the book. You probably need to delete half of it. Or think about if you were to do this book again, because I still wanted to do the white supremacists, neo-Nazis, far right stuff. Said, if you wanted to focus on that, how would you do that book differently? Is there anything else that interests you? And she'd said there was those AFP raids on the ABC a little while ago. I mean, is that something that sparks an idea for you? That sort of alleged abuse of power. And I thought about it for a week, and then I grabbed the warrant that was used to raid the ABC that I had, and in that warrant was the power. AFP came into the building. Just for your listeners, they were looking for the source of a story that the ABC had been investigating about alleged human rights violations, abuses by Australian soldiers in Afghanistan, which we know to be true. And they were after that source. And of course, the ABC would be protecting our sources, that we wouldn't hand that over. No good journalist would. They came in with a warrant that gave them the power to alter, change, copy, or delete our files in the course of that investigation. So alter, change, copy, or delete, signed off by a district court judge. So that warrant, I thought, okay, what if that warrant got into the wrong hands? What if that warrant What if there was a bad egg in the Australian Federal Police that choose to use that power in a different way? So for instance, someone coming into your home, going into your computer, changing your files, altering them, deleting them in the course of their investigation. So that worried me, that power existed. So then I went back to her and I said, you know what? I'm not going to try to fix this other book. I'm going to learn from this experience. I'm going to plot out a book here. It's going to be about white supremacists, neo-Nazis. And then the second thing is going to be abuse of power. So my character, John Bailey, gets raided with a warrant that gives them the power to alter, change, copy or delete his files. So that, for me...
That's extraordinary. Has that always been the case?
Yep. Well, it's a power that's been used, yeah. I mean, it's in the warrant. Australian Federal Police had it.
When everything came out in the end, Tim, did that... Was it abused or not? Or was it used properly?
No, it wasn't abused.
Were those powers used properly in that situation?
In regards to the ABC?
Yeah.
Yes. There's no evidence that they abused that power.
Yeah.
But the fact that it existed is what worried me in the first place.
Yeah, right.
Alter, change, copy,
What
delete.
could that mean for a journalist?
Well, it means that a journalist, the police can just roll into your house whenever they like.
And what, change what you wrote or what? Is that what you mean? Or?
Absolutely.
Wow.
I mean, alter, change, copy, delete. So that's a direct quote from the warrant, a direct quote. So the definition of that direct quote would be that they can go into your files and alter, copy, and delete.
Wow. It's like the truth. It's like God.
That's right. So I thought this shouldn't exist, and I'm going to explore it in this book and see what happens if it's abused.
Good.
So then that book, I wrote that book in 7 months, writing on weekends only.
Yeah, right.
It just came out.
So you did take that. You did take that premise, for The Enemy Within.
I did,
yeah,
and that's what. And then that book, shortlisted for Ned Kelly, shortlisted for Danger Prize. It's
right.
I'd say. It was
so that's an idea shift there. So that sort of would have taught you how important that part of it is for that book.
But also it taught me a new discipline around plotting more. So I was really thinking around plotting, and I don't do full outlines, but I sometimes do. But I always do plotting outlines, but it just depends on how much detail I go into.
Yeah,
I may do half an outline, it's enough to get going because I know what happens at the end or have an idea, so I can get going. And then I pause and I might outline a bit more. But that book made me, I guess, as I was getting more into this writing journey, realise that you can't do the same trick twice,
Right.
So you need to come up with different ways of doing things, and that's where good plotting comes in.
Yeah.
So that one I did a bit of an outline, got going, and then once I was really hitting my straps, it just came out. And it was 7 months and a 85,000 word book.
Yeah. Wow. What is the secret to writing a page turner?
Great characters, great plot, full of surprises, and really respecting that the reader needs to be entertained by what you're doing.
Does a detailed plot line then make it easier for you to write more cohesively?
I tend to write and plot at the same time. I might get going with a book.
Write and plot at the same time.
I might get going with a book and write 10,000 words as I have a general idea of what I'm trying to do.
Yep.
And then I might stop and then do a pretty detailed plot outline from there. And that might be only the next 10, 15, 20 chapters with a good understanding of where it's going. But so I'll pause and write after I've worked some things out rather than write my way through plotting.
Yeah, okay. Can you share any details about your next project?
Look, the next project I'm actually... I'm doing a few things at the moment. I'm writing another book in the series.
Yep.
I'm playing around with a standalone book idea as well. But I'm working on with a production company called CJZ on the TV series, which is an adaptation of all the books. Yeah. So...
Has that been in the works for a while?
It's been in the works for a little while. These things take a long time because the budgets are so big to make good television. And so there's a screenwriter called Blake Ashford who's a wonderful screenwriter. He's Mystery Road Origins and Barracuda and House of Gods and lots of really good series that he's written and been involved in. He's the lead screenwriter on this. So we've had many writers' rooms already. There's episodes have been written and more are being written. I'm a story consultant for the series, and it's looking great. But these things take time. I'm hoping that we'll have more news on that, in the next sort of 6 to 12 months, and will people get to see it on screens and see John Bailey that they've seen in the books and see what the screen version looks like.
Wow, that's huge. Do you learn? I imagine script from novel. Do you learn a bit from that process?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that, but great storytelling is great storytelling, whether it's on screen or in the books. It's interesting though, with television, I may have a mention of something. It could be a line or a paragraph in a book. And if that's going to be important to the actual telling, which is the showing of a TV show, that might be 3 minutes of television you've got to work out. Or there could be a character that is a bit part, but you need to actually see them do the things that I've said they did in the book.
Yeah.
Interesting. So there's a lot of layers to a TV show or a film that are not in a book, and then there's a lot in a book that is not going to be seen in a TV show. That's a lot of the thought track stuff in their heads, So they're different. So I'm learning a lot about TV as we go with this, which has been great. But it's also
is that of interest to you?
It is, yeah. It's absolutely of interest to me, and it's also made me think about, as I'm writing, the characters in the book, how I'm writing them, the scenes, the places that I use as settings as now as well. I sort of think I've always thought quite visually and written quite visually, which is probably why there was that interest to turn it into a TV series, because it's not just one book they're looking at all the books to make a long-running TV series, we hope. So, and they're calling it, the working title at the moment is John Bailey.
Wow. Okay.
And he's the central character with the 5 books I've written, and the others have got planned. So that has been a great experience for me. And I'm learning constantly, and the screenwriting stuff is something that I'm also interested in learning down the track too. But I understand that totally and respect that it's a different skill.
Yep.
And that I would need to learn that, and I've loved learning it from the great screenwriters like Blake that I've been spending time with.
What are you working on in the current one? What are you trying to improve?
My mission as a writer is to write a better book every single time I sit down to write.
Yeah.
That's what I try to do.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to get it down at the moment, but I've had periods where I've stopped and really plotted and tried to work out some things. I'm looking at, the only thing I'd probably say about this one is I'm looking at vaping and the chop illicit tobacco market in Australia. It's worth multi-billions of dollars.
It seems to have sort of coming up somewhere. There's like a discount tobacco store in the middle of the suburbs. I was like, why is that? What's that doing there?
So it's illegal. It's illegal to sell tobacco products, vaping products in this country, but they are everywhere. They are coming in from China, coming in from the Middle East. Illegal cigarettes are coming in. They're being sold everywhere.
Yeah.
And the police just aren't equipped to deal with it. Legislation is not caught up with it because they're not classing them properly, because they don't feel they know what's in them properly. So it's an absolute perfect storm right now. It's a totally unregulated market, and it's an illegal market that they can't police either, because they don't have enough people to do it. So you go, there are literally thousands and thousands of retailers in this country right now selling vaping products and illegal tobacco products, illegal cigarettes.
Right.
And if they get picked up for it, they'll get fined. They'll go, no worries, the fine's so small. They'll go, no worries, here you go. And then they'll just keep going.
Right.
And I feel that the poor police said they're hamstrung because it's all coming in and there's no real legislation there to regulate it.
Right. Conflict. Do you have to be mindful of conflict? Or does it come naturally to you when you write, that you've got the right amount of conflict going on?
Yeah, look, conflict, there's many different types of conflict, which could be, from disagreement to you want something that I have, or I'm looking for something that somebody has and I need to figure out who has it. I mean, that's part of good plotting and good storytelling.
Do you need to be mindful of conflict when you're writing?
What do you mean by conflict?
Well, exactly what you were saying, like man versus nature, man versus himself, man versus society. Like, it's not just an argument for the sake of it, but we do find that interesting. That's what we find engaging, isn't it?
I think connecting readers on a human level in any way is powerful. So conflict is central to that, because we are all going through some form of conflict in ourselves, whether it's the job we hate,
Yes.
the struggles we have with our friends or our relationships at home, or financial instability, or whatever. All of these things involved in some way conflict, whether it's an internal conflict or it's a conflict with an individual.
Yeah.
So I think really interesting characters have a lot of internal conflict.
Yeah.
And often it's because they're trying to do something that they believe is right. But it's the methods to get there where the conflict arises. So that's where interesting characters can come in. And then when you're talking about the more basic understanding of conflict, then you're actually looking at what does conflict look like, and that could be a fight.
Yeah.
So yeah, conflict, I think in books is central to it, because it's central to human nature.
Yeah. Very good. Is there a technique that you think's unique to you, or you use a bit to get your stories across?
Dialogue is something that is really important in good storytelling, because it allows you to show rather than tell. So if you can show readers who a person is through the way they speak, then that's great storytelling.
How do you show?
Well, it's making it really conversational. I will rewrite conversational dialogue over and over and over again, 50 times, just going through, sweep through, saying stuff out loud. So there are dialogue-heavy parts of my books at times, because rather than me dictating, this is what's happening in this book, if I can carry them through a conversation, then I think that's a far more entertaining way to be able to convey, to get across.
Hard to do too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to do, but I really love writing dialogue, because it really tells you a lot about a character.
I know in movies subtext is quite important. Is it the same with novels?
I just think layers is important.
Yeah.
In novels.
Like sometimes they're not saying what they really say. Is that so much in novels as it is in movies?
Really good writing can get that across. It's very hard to do.
Yes.
I think that you need to be on a journey with that character first,
right,
before you know what they're really meaning when they say something.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and or it could be with what they do for a living that could allow you to think, I don't know about that when they say something. So yeah, you can get there, but with books as opposed to screen, you don't have visual cues.
No, gotcha. Yeah, no, that's. I guess that's what I was. In a nutshell, what do you think people are taking away from The Wrong Man?
Misogyny is a scourge in society right now. More women are dying at the hands of men than at any time. And with this book, I've wanted to peel back a few layers on some of the root causes of misogynist violence and where it starts, whether it's a bad joke in the workplace that moves to sharing a sexualised image, to actual acts of violence. And with this book, I've really wanted to, I guess, pull back the curtain on that one, on that issue, and obviously write a crime novel that I think is going to entertain readers, but also make people stop and think a bit, and think about many ways what they can do to try to curb this issue that doesn't seem to have a solution.
Brilliant. On that, it's all looking up for Tim Ayliffe. Tim, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
If you like this world, you might like another world. Watch this video now.